All right. I never know how long a minute is when I say I'm going to leave it a minute, but I think we have a good number of you here with us already as participants. So I think let's get started because we have lots to cover. So great to see everyone again and welcome back and thank you for joining us for this second part of our two-part training on gender equality in capital markets. So as I mentioned, for those who were here right at the start, please feel free to reintroduce yourselves in the chat if you'd like to say hello again. But we've got a packed schedule today, so we're going to get started and make sure that you have all the resources that you need to support you on this topic. So thank you again to the Philippine Stock Exchange, to Rich and the team for hosting us today. This program is truly a collaborative effort. And as part of this training, it was developed with the IFC, with UN Women, Columbia University, and the support of the Luxembourg government. So really grateful to all of those organizations for their partnership and support. So for anyone who missed part one of the training, we will be posting the recording onto our event webpage for this session in the next few days. So we'll share the link in the chat to where you can find this. It will also be this page as a reminder where you can download the speaker slides and the main slide handout presentation here as well, so that you can access all of the links that we talk about throughout the session. So make sure to check out that page, which I think Landon will just share with you so that you can find the materials. Just to say, I do know we've had a couple, I don't know if the technical problems on our website are affecting users, Landon, or if it's just us.
Uh, yeah, I'm hoping it's not users, but yeah, please
Okay.
be patient if you're not able to access the recording or the slides today. We're just having some minor tech issues, but please be patient and check back perhaps Monday if you're not able to access it.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that, Landon. But as we said, those things will be there if they're not there already. Brilliant. So just as a quick reminder on a few housekeeping points, as you probably know, you are muted in the training session, but this doesn't mean that we don't want your participation. So please make sure to use the chat box if you'd like to share any comments, discussion with other participants, etc. And then if you have any particular questions for the team, please make sure that you post those into the Q&A box in particular. This is great because it just allows us to keep track and directly answer your question, which might get lost in the chat. And you also have the option within the Q&A box to post anonymously as well, if you'd like to ask your question that way. And again, a quick recap on our sort of format for today. So we have 2 hours of live facilitation together. We'll have ongoing opportunity for Q&A, as I said, throughout that. And we'll have a number of active opportunities for participation. We'll be using Menti and the polls again. So please do make the most of those opportunities to get involved throughout the session. And finally, you'll be pleased to know by the end of today's training, you'll be able to receive your completion certificate for taking part in the course. So we'll tell you more about that at the end of the program, but to do so and get your certificate, you'll need to fill out a survey, which we'll share with you at the end of the training. So to reintroduce who's going to be delivering the training for you today, as you've probably guessed, it's myself and Landon again joining you from the UN SSE team. And we're very pleased today to be joined by another of our colleagues from UN Women. So we're joined by Amy Baum, who is the Programme Specialist for Women's Economic Empowerment, based within the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. So Amy will be coming in later in the session to talk to us more about the WEPs and taking action aligned to those. And then we're also very pleased to have two guest speakers joining us in the training today as well. So firstly, we'll be joined by Paul Shaheen from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, who'll be speaking to us about gender bonds. And secondly, we will have Nina Pearson joining us from the EDGE Certified Foundation to speak more about EDGE, which we introduced a little bit in our part one session on Wednesday. So just as a reminder of the sort of structure of the course and what we're working through together in the training. So firstly, this course has 4 modules, and these have been developed to really walk you through the 4 steps for improving gender equality performance for global markets. So today we're going to be focusing on the 2 second steps, which are implement and communicate. So this builds off really what we learned in the last session. So hopefully, if you were able to join us for that, you're going to remember what we covered on prepare and align, but we will recap a few of the concepts from Wednesday for those who'd like a refresher. But really, an important thing to note about this circle diagram is that we know that this is an ongoing process. So, in practice, obviously, you may well be taking action across all of these areas in parallel and continuing to revisit them as you aim for constant improvement. So, we present these in a nice sequential order for the purposes of training, but of course, we know in reality things are a little more complicated than that. Okay, so there's two main objectives from today's training, which we're hoping will be able to support you in achieving together today. So firstly, we'd like to help you to understand how to capture market value for gender equality performance. So be that through gender smart investment strategies or through the creation of gender focused financial products. And secondly, we want to help you today to communicate gender-related information with internal stakeholders for effective communication and to identify the guidelines that you can use for communicating gender-related information with external stakeholders to really know what information investors are looking for in corporate reports. And so to achieve these objectives, we've planned around 45 minutes for each of those two units we're covering today. And we'll, again, as the same as the first session, have a short break in the middle and some time at the end to wrap up and share some resources with you. Okay, so to get us going, we'd like to go back to Menti again, as we used last session, just to understand what you know already about the topics we're going to be covering today, and also to test your knowledge on a little bit of a concept that we covered from last time. So if you follow the link that Landon's just shared in the chat to Menti, we'll run through those questions together there. And what I'll do is I'll share my screen so we can see your responses coming in as well. Okay, so first question, as I said, was just to get a sense of your understanding on those areas we're looking to cover together today. So firstly, on the value that gender equality can add to investment strategies. Secondly, on how to communicate gender-related information to investors. And then finally, how to explain to your colleagues the financial value of gender equality. So pretty consistent scores so far across all of those three areas, but somewhere in the middle of the scale and maybe just slowly creeping backwards as I see a few extra responses coming in. So I can see there's some different pockets of kind of understanding though. So some of you coming out higher up the scale as well. So please do feel free to share any comments and perspectives you have in the chat as we go along for those of you who have some familiarity with these topics, but good to understand and hopefully we'll be able to help move you along that scale through the session today. And then the second question for you to get us started was just a quick test on one of the concepts that we covered from last time, just to check if that was clear in your minds, and we'll recap on it after the question as well. So I think we're up to 37 people in the room. Anyone else want to join us? I'll give it just a second in case anyone wants to get involved. One or two more. You get the added bonus of a fun emoticon if you do. Oh, someone left. Never mind. We'll go with that then. So I'll hit enter and then the question will come up for you. So the question to ask is really, what is the overall objective here? Is the objective equity or equality? So see if you can take your mind back to what we covered on Wednesday and have a think about what you think the right answer is there, and then we'll run through the correct answer together. Okay, I think most people have been able to vote. Oh, we've got a very even split. So a few more of you coming out on the side of thinking equity than equality, but overall quite even split between the two. And of course, they're very similar words, so we do understand that can be easy to maybe be a little bit confused on, but we have 21 of you who got the right answer, which was that equality is the overall objective here. And so we'll just go back now and recap in the slides on that diversity, equality, diversity, equity, and inclusion equation that we talked through last time that sort of reaches overall equality. So here's the sort of diagram that summarizes that equation. So as you'll see, equality is the sort of central objective here that we're aiming to achieve. But of course, equity is one of the key parts of that. So all important to come together as part of the equation. But just as a quick reminder, if you remember what we discussed here last time about how important each of these concepts is. So firstly, with diversity, this is about ensuring that we have multiple identities represented. So here we mean different sexes, genders, culture, race, ethnicity, and so on. Diversity is really around having a seat at the boardroom. And then if we speak about equity, this is about being recognized and reorganizing the power distribution in the organization. So equity is being able to speak. So think of it as providing a microphone, perhaps to those who are least able to talk at the moment. And then last but not least, we also have to ensure inclusion. So this is about ensuring that everyone feels welcomed and giving them the equal opportunity to connect, to belong, and to grow. So overall, that they can contribute to the organization and feel comfortable and confident being their authentic selves. So we can sort of liken inclusion as to being having the headsets to allow us to interpret and understand everyone and feel welcome. So if diversity is about counting people, inclusion is about really making their people count. So you'll just see there that kind of summary of how those three concepts come together towards the overall objective of equality that we're aiming for here. And just to quickly recap on a few more concepts from last time. So firstly, just to mention about the impacts of increasing gender equality. So as a reminder, we learned that improving gender equality can provide many benefits to society and the economy beyond the boardroom or the corporate environment. So we show that in our training and the studies that we've shared with you that gender equality can decrease violence, it can increase economic productivity, and it can also lead to better impact and outcomes for financial resilience and reducing environmental impacts as well. But of course, what we didn't say is that specifically women drive these benefits. What it is really showing is that it's the equality part that helps to deliver these impacts. And then if we connect these aspects at the societal level into the corporate sphere, we can also say that increasing equality in a corporate leadership context has also been found to contribute to increased profits, better transparency, and improved environmental impacts. And then just a quick reminder that we introduced with our colleague Tony from UN Women last session, the women's empowerment principles as well, and those 7 principles that can really help get you started and improve your practices here. And as a quick reminder on the 7th principle there on measurement and reporting, we're going to go into more detail about that later today when we're thinking about disclosures. And then a final recap was the kind of concepts around corporate culture. So if you remember, we ran through that fictitious case study with those 2 companies, Owl Inc. and Peacock PLC. And what I hope we helped to demonstrate with that case study is how important cultural changes within the organization to really contribute towards achieving better equality within organizations. So it's not just about having good intentions here, but it's really around systematically and thoroughly understanding the barriers and root causes of equality issues within an organization so that we can get to the heart of taking action on the issues that are driving those problems. Okay, so with that, that brings us to a little bit of a recap, and now we're going to be transitioning into the start of our 3rd unit, which is all around gender lens finance and the market mechanisms that can support those principles that we've discussed already in the training so far. So to get us started with that, I'll hand over to you, Landon. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Fiona, and good morning, everyone. Great to have you here with us today again. So when we're looking at the implementation of gender equality, we'll talk a bit more about products that support market action, and we'll also look at mechanisms that add value and promote gender equality in markets. Sorry, Fiona, I don't seem to have slide control right now, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So let's look at how financial products are being used to support gender equality and what opportunities lie within those financing mechanisms for gender allied companies. To get started, let's look at the trends we're seeing in sustainable finance more broadly. So this chart, which you can now see, and you can find this in the UNCTAD World Investment Report, I believe, 2024. It shows that the total number of sustainability-themed funds globally increased, although the rate of growth has slowed a bit since 2021. That total now stands at about 7,500 funds, up 7% from 2022. And those funds are worth about 3 trillion USD, so quite a large amount. Excuse me. We do see in 2023 a bit of a decrease in global net investment flows to these funds, but it's important to also note that this decline was largely as a result of depressed asset values and investor withdrawals amid persistent market uncertainties such as high inflation, rising interest rates, poor market returns, and there was concerns of a recession. So as such, sustainability-themed funds remain an important tool to direct capital towards sustainable development. We're also seeing significant growth in gender lens investing. However, the data on gender lens investing is a bit more difficult to measure, and we have less clear of an idea of the exact magnitude of funds that consider these factors. Although in a moment, I'll speak to a new SSE report about this that tries to help start solving a bit of this issue. And we don't have enough time today to dive into this topic totally, but we've provided you with some extra slides in your handout on this that you can review in your own time as well. So if this is a topic you really are keen on, please review the handout slides after today's session. But we haven't covered this yet. What is gender lens investing? You might be asking yourself. So let's take a moment to discuss that. Please share in the chat what you think gender lens investing is. You can share just a few words. If you have kind of a working definition, maybe your team uses, please feel free to share that. It could even just be 1 or 2 words. Yeah, let's see some answers. What do people think gender lens investing is? Okay, a couple answers coming in. Okay, Jake noted woman-led or woman-owned businesses. Okay, there's a component of that. We'll discuss that a bit more later. It's kind of almost a measurement or metric that we think about within gender lens investing. Hanan noted investment based on gender, so no one is left behind. Okay, great. Alexa noted intentional selection of programs, projects, businesses to fund according to DEI principles. Okay. What else do we have? Investments made to support women initiatives or support. Okay. Okay, great. And one last answer I'll note. Investing on the perspective of other genders, okay, and gender lens investing, putting money into companies or projects that help promote gender equality. Okay, nice. So those are some good answers. So it's clear, at least from those answers, that a lot of you already have a rough idea of some, components or a sense of what gender lens investing is. But for the sakes of this training, we'll look at an official definition now. So the official definition that we're using from the Global Impact Investing Network defines gender lens investing as investment strategies applied to an allocation or to the entirety of an investment portfolio, which seek to examine gender dynamics to better inform investment decisions and/or intentionally and measurably address gender disparities. So as the name gender lens investing makes clear, gender is a lens, a way of seeing that helps an investor to highlight opportunity, illuminate risk, and understand strategy in a more nuanced way. You might ask now, how are investors using that gender lens to make investment decisions? Well, there's many different strategies here, and some of the core strategies we see look specifically at what focus an investment strategy with a gender lens takes, but often we'll see a combination of multiple or all of these strategies to varying degrees within a gender lens investment strategy. The most common strategy you might be familiar with is a focus on leadership. That, for example, investing in perhaps it's a mutual fund or a private equity fund that invests in companies with female CEOs, so women leaders. But other areas that we see investment strategies focusing on are employees, supply chains, products and services, and community. At the firm level, fund managers can drive the adoption of gender lens or gender smart investing by starting with their own investment house. Fund managers can strengthen the gender diversity of their own teams, for example, by the leadership setting clear targets or building a respectful workplace culture or making commitments to gender diversity. The IFC has developed a framework that we link to in this slide that includes designing a gender smart investment strategy, engaging, training, rewarding people within the firm, enhancing or adapting investment processes and systems, and identifying and collaborating with partners and external stakeholders at the firm level. Now, that was the firm level, but if we look at a portfolio level, fund managers can adopt strategies in both origination and portfolio management. These strategies enable fund managers to allocate capital to companies that are committed to these 5 key areas on your screen. I just mentioned one, which is women represented in leadership, or it could be a gender diverse and equitable workforce. They could look for a gender inclusive value chain. They could also look for companies offering and designing products or services that consider the distinct needs of women, or also ensuring their operations do no harm to women in the community. The good news is that the benefits of gender diversity are becoming more and more widely recognized, and with that, investor demand for gender smart investment opportunities has increased considerably. This has led to the emergence of a variety of gender-focused or gender-themed financial products across asset classes. To give a brief overview of the investment universe, we'll take a look here at how investment can be channeled towards gender equality and gender smart investments. On the left-hand side of the slide, we see that there's a few buckets in terms of the financial products that can be used to direct financial flows towards gender equality. That could be equity-based financial products. That could be debt or fixed income financial products, such as gender bonds, which we'll discuss in a moment, and also funds, which can either be debt or equity-based. On the right-hand side, we can see that investors accessing these financial products also vary. So we can see there's both retail and individual investors, also institutional investors, who, for example, are making use of financing vehicles. It's important to note because different investors have different needs and expectations, which can lead to a diversity of products as well to meet those different needs. Before we move into some case studies to give you a bit more of a real-world case study on some of the gender lens investment products out there, I just want to take a moment to quickly highlight and share about our new publication on gender-themed financial products. It was just released this week. It provides a global inventory and analysis of nearly 300 gender-themed financial instruments, including bonds, equity funds, indices across both developed and emerging markets. I'll just mention a couple key insights from the report. We found that gender-themed financial products remain a niche yet growing segment of the global financial market, with index and market benchmark-based tools comprising a substantial share. We also consider those knowledge products. And then government-issued gender bonds are particularly prominent in emerging markets, while gender-themed equity funds hold low asset values and inconsistent alignment with the WEPs. We discussed the WEPs last session, of course. So we used those WEPs to tie into our analysis. And we also saw that there's an absence of standardized definitions, reporting frameworks, and taxonomies in place, which can contribute to concerns about gender washing, where gender labels may be used without demonstrating real impact, which is a growing issue. The report urges greater integration of gender equality into sustainable finance taxonomies, stronger verification mechanisms in alignment with the WEPS and Sustainable Development Goal, or SDG 5, to ensure gender-themed investments deliver meaningful outcomes. Now, with that, we'll take a look at some real-world case studies to help you get a better understanding of some of these examples of gender products. The first example builds on what we discussed on Wednesday about how climate and gender benefits can coexist. This example comes from Gold Standard, which is an organization established in 2003 by WWF and other international NGOs to ensure projects that reduce carbon emissions featured the highest levels of environmental integrity and also contributed to sustainable development. So what we see here is the Longo Safe Water Project in Uganda. The project received the first ever Gold Standard gender responsive certification 5 years ago in 2020. And this project rehabilitates boreholes to provide clean water in rural Uganda. And at least as of August 2023, the credits are available to purchase on the Gold Standard Marketplace, which offers purchasers the option to choose carbon credits from a project which has been rigorously assessed to reduce gender inequality. We just want to highlight some of the social and climate impacts of the project. They've seen 50,000 tons of CO2 emission reductions per year. They've seen 40,000 individuals enjoying clean water access and also reducing incidences of waterborne illness. They've seen each household gaining almost 4 hours per week from reduced water collection needs. That's mostly saving time for young women and girls. Reduced school absenteeism due to less exposure to waterborne disease and less time spent collecting water. We can look even further into the gender equality impact of the project, and that report also shows that the Water Resource Committee is approaching parity with 46% female to 54% male representation. So we're seeing a lot of local woman leadership in this project, which is great. They've also seen reported incidences of domestic violence related to water collection have dropped to 0 compared to 35% prior to the project start. And 100% of the surveyed water users spend the time saved on domestic work, as well as income generating activities, as well as some social and leisure activities. So in sum, the impact report really shows overall fantastic impacts that actually go not just for women and young girls, but everyone in the community is benefiting. It's also important to note that Gold Standard, when certifying projects for carbon credits, have 2 levels of gender analysis. One is mandatory and one voluntary. From the mandatory side, all projects must achieve a gender sensitivity status. In addition, they have the option of becoming gender responsive, which requires a deeper level of analysis in setting gender-related goals and targets. So we do have some more case studies, but for the sake of time, we'll save those, and I'll allow Paul to share a bit more about how gender is being included as a benefit of social bonds. But you can read the next 2 case studies in the slides on your own time. The one we see here on gender bonds. And yeah, we'll leave it there. But for the sake of time, we'll keep going, and I'll turn it back over to Fiona.
Great, thank you, Landon. So we're going to have a little bit of a deeper look now at this type of bond and what that can mean. So just to kind of get clear really on what exactly gender bonds are. So I'm going to focus kind of now on broadly where gender bonds sit in the market, and then Paul will be taking us through more details on this in a moment as well. But firstly, just to cover the basics. So as you can see here, gender-focused bonds are a subset of bonds within the green, social, and sustainable bond universe. So gender bonds are often not seen as a category of bonds themselves, like we see perhaps in green bond situation, but increasingly we are seeing bonds that have a gender focus. So either by setting distinct KPIs relating to gender, or linking to projects that support or enhance gender equality, in that example from the Gold Standard that Landon just shared. And so what I want to highlight here is that we can also see a distinct overlapping with green bonds for climate and gender co-benefit, as we've already talked about. So if we take a look at the debt markets, we can see here that overall there has been a significant growth in sustainable finance through social bonds over a sort of 5-year time frame. So again, this data here comes from the World Investments Report in 2024. And as of that report, the cumulative global issuance for sustainable bonds sat at 1.5 trillion US dollars. So as you can probably see from the graph here, we have also seen some declines since 2020. But the report sort of suggests that overall this was found to be in line with the broader bond market. But it's clear that in the general kind of time frame since 2018, we have ultimately seen a big increase in the issuance of social and mixed sustainability bonds. So we're still expecting a long-term growth trajectory there. So whilst we may, of course, be familiar with green bonds, it's important to notice that specifically since 2020, we have seen a growth more so in these social bonds and mixed sustainability bonds, which, as we've touched on, will include bonds with gender-related objectives. So there's a number of different guidelines that can be used to help determine what actually qualifies as a gender bond. And importantly, these guidelines are useful whether you're an issuer of such a bond or an investor looking at investing in bonds that contribute to real gender equality impacts. So you can see 2 examples of them on the screen. So firstly, the social bond principles, which provide guidelines for issuing social bonds, and then also the Climate Bonds Initiative's methodology that they've developed, which helps to determine whether to include a bond in its social and sustainability bond database. So what I think is most important about these guidelines is that they're really helping us to build trust in the market and ensure that social bonds are designed to achieve their intended positive objectives. So it's not enough to just call something a gender-focused bond. We need to actually understand the intended impact and whether or not that impact is being achieved. So that just gives us a brief introduction to some of the key trends in this space and ensuring we're clear on the concept of what a gender bond is. But we're going to take a little bit more of a look at this in practice with our guest speaker today. So very pleased to be joined by Paul Shaheen from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. Many thanks, and over to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Fiona. It's always a pleasure to be with the UNSSE initiative during these very important trainings that you organize for the capital markets to promote gender equality. So thank you again for the invitation. And well, good morning also to London, and good afternoon to everyone who is listening to us from the other side of the world. My name is Paul Shaheen, and I work at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange as a sustainable finance manager within the Luxembourg Green Exchange. And I'm with you today to deep dive a little bit for maybe 15 minutes on the subject of gender-focused bonds. I will share some slides, and just let me know if you can see my screen. It should be the case, I believe.
We do have them, yeah. I don't know if it's possible to go into full screen, just in the top right there. You see just under your icon, I think. Yeah. Awesome.
Yes, we can. Perfect. So as Fiona actually mentioned, we do have in the market what we call today the gender-focused bonds, but not as an dedicated, let's say, category of bonds. For the ones who are active in this market, you most probably know that kind of officially we have only 4 types of instruments that we can use in order to raise funds in a sustainable way, let's say, in the capital markets, and these are the green, social sustainability, and the sustainability-linked bonds. There is no official category provided by the ICMA, for instance, or any other entity for a dedicated like gender bonds. But as Fiona said, during the last couple of years, we have seen a lot of focus from issuers in the capital markets and also from investors on issuing and dedicating, let's say, some maybe of the use of proceeds or 100% of those proceeds to gender equality rated projects. And from the investors on the other side, we have seen a keen interest in investing in those instruments. This is what led actually, This is what led actually the Luxembourg Stock Exchange to join efforts, let's say, with other entities in the market to promote this initiative, let's say, or to promote this interest in the market. So to see more and more bonds, whether being social or sustainability linked bond, and in some cases definitely some green bonds, who have this gender focus. Now, as Fiona said, despite the fact that we don't have maybe a dedicated principles or standards for the gender bonds similar to what we have for the other instruments, however, we have in the market some guidelines which can help potential issuers and also potential investors to better understand how they can use the available instruments that we have in the market to foster gender equality. And what you see on the slide maybe is one of the most important guidelines, which was prepared together between the ICMA, the UN Women, and IFC to provide this kind of clarity and guidance to potential issuers of this type of instrument. Now, that led us at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange to take a step ahead and to try to identify and to better understand actually why some bonds can be seen as gender or gender focused, let's say. And we did a bit of study on our stock of social and sustainability linked bonds, which are listed on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange and displayed on the Green Exchange. And these are the results. This is what I'm sharing with you today. So as we have mentioned, the gender focus can be seen under the social bonds or under the sustainability bonds in most of the cases. Well, under the green, it's a little bit indirect and difficult maybe to trace. But if we take the use of proceeds bond, which are the social and sustainability, and try to identify whether some of them might have a gender focus or not, as you know, this is something that we can see in two places, pre-issuance and post-issuance, because at pre-issuance, the issuers of those instruments should prepare the framework, and they should highlight in the framework where they will be using the proceeds. So if at the framework level, we see that there is an intention from the issuer to finance or to dedicate, let's say, 100% of the proceed or less to gender-related projects, gender equality-related projects, with a clear intention to contribute to SDG number 5, which is the SDG related to gender equality, then we can, tag this instrument as a potential gender-focused bond instrument. Now, as you know, and it has been mentioned also by Fiona, it's about the impact. Everything is about the impact. It's not really about the intention. So on the post-issuance level, we look at the reporting that the issuer has issued on a yearly basis to actually verify if indeed they dedicated what they have promised in the framework in like gender equality related projects. And here again, we try to look and find if there is any dedication, a clear, confirmation to the contribution to SDG number 5. And if we find this, then we can consider, and this is on our market, it's quite clear on our Luxembourg Stock Exchange, we can consider this bond as a social or as a sustainability bond with a gender focused. And we can tag it in a special way on our website in order for the investors to, to provide some visibility to those instruments to potential investors, but also to promote the existence of these instruments for potential issuers in this case. Now, Fiona also mentioned that in some cases we use KPI, issuers use KPIs. And if they link those KPIs to a gender equality, subject, then also here we can consider these bonds as gender focused. I'm sure that you have understood we are talking about the SLBs here, so the sustainability linked bonds, where the issuer raise funds in the capital markets and link the let's say, this issuance to the achievement or not to sustainability targets. In this case, too, we look at the framework and at the reporting, post-issuance reporting, to see if there is at least one KPI that is targeting gender equality. And again, in this case, we can tag those instruments on our market as sustainability-linked bond, but gender-focused in this case. So this is a kind of a let's say, contribution from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange to the understanding of these, let's say, instruments, to promoting also these instruments in the market, and telling issuers that there is interest from investors for this type of instruments. Stop with the theory. Let's maybe take some case studies to see in practice how it can be done. Here I have case study coming from Africa, from NMB Bank, which is the very first financial institution in sub-Saharan Africa to issue a gender bond. And here we have actually an interview with the bank. Yes, I think our colleagues are putting the interview for you to listen to. So please, thank you, Fiona, or thank you, Landon.
It's a commercial bank, universal commercial bank, based in Tanzania, East Africa, that serves retail clients, corporate clients, and governments. I'm the treasurer for the bank, so main responsibility really is around mobilizing funds, so liquidity management, foreign exchange risk management, interest risk management, and coordination, just to make sure that there's balance sheet optimization and as well as capital allocation. So our gender bond really is a use of proceeds bond, that we issued in line with the international capital markets principles under the social bonds framework that allows us to raise money from the public and finance, women-owned businesses or enterprises that are dominantly owned by women, or businesses whose products and services actually eventually, service the female. Women proposition is a very important segment for our bank. And yes, we had a very fantastic proposition for women's savings, but we realized on the financing side, we need to do something to mobilize additional funding to support growth for women-owned businesses. So we felt it was necessary for us, because a strategic fit for us is really to diversify portfolio. And given the risk profile of women as far as loans is concerned, we realized that the non-performing loans ratios are actually lower than that of the male counterparts.
Sorry, everyone. I appreciate it. It's really quiet, so I'm going to try just switching the computer that I'm sharing it from, just in the hope that improves the sound. Apologies for that, everyone.
If it might help, Fiona, from my side, it was good, the volume, but I don't know for the other participants. So maybe they can share on the chat what is the case. But please go ahead.
That the non-performing loans ratios are actually lower than that of the male counterparts.
That's better.
Yes, so the projects we tend to finance, or that we're financing with these, are predominantly female-owned enterprises, and it cuts across different sectors, be it renewable energy, agriculture, health, education, and manufacturing as well.
Sorry, everyone, I've overcomplicated this now, I think. Give me 1 second. Sorry for the disruption.
Okay.
Right, I think we should be. Sorry about that.
Interesting that we measure the number of new loans that are issued to MSEs, so micro to medium and small enterprises women. But also it will be interesting for us, and we're doing that, to measure what impact that is having on their social and economic life. So how many jobs are created? Are they growing? Are they not? Are they expanding their businesses? I think those kind of metrics are very important, and it's part of our KPIs in ensuring that these funds actually put to the right use. Indeed, we've issued other types of bonds, retail bonds, corporate bonds. The difference with this gender bond is that the use of proceeds requires a lot of transparency. Investors require that you go back to them to tell them, how these funds have been used. But in addition to that, it has to go in line with, the social bond principles and in line with the international capital markets, principle on social bonds. As opposed to the other bonds that you could simply raise and finance all manner of activities, without accountability to the investors. This requires significant accountability and transparency as far as investors are concerned. It was very well received by investors, domestic investors, and as well as international investors. As a matter of fact, it got 197% oversubscription. So we had significant appetite seeing from international financiers, but as well as domestic retail and corporate investors. I think one obvious one was the misconception, that you have a gender bond in the market, financing women, and therefore there was a perception that perhaps the bond subscribers were meant to be female. And so it requires a lot of effort, marketing effort, to ensure that the male counterparts actually understood that it's not just for female, but they could also invest to help advance female. So that was a key challenge for us. But the other one is obviously data quality, especially in some of these emerging markets, still remains to be an issue. So you need to capture the right data at onboarding stage becomes very important, because you really get to realize how critical that is when you're doing your impact measurement and reporting. But the other aspect is the opportunities are still huge. The financing gap for female generally is still quite huge, and that is why there's need for us perhaps also to consider scaling up, such insurances, going forward. Yes, just related to the previous question. So we realize we need to do more still, so certainly we need to raise more funding, be it domestically, be it partnering with DFIs or developing financial institutions, to just make sure that we can scale up, that portfolio. The need is there. I think we need to answer a very critical question of affordability, which keeps coming up, and hopefully using things like guarantee schemes from some of these development financial institutions will enable us actually affordably extend credit to female entrepreneurs. I think critical for me, again, back to what I've said, is data, at the onboarding stage. You need to get it right. But at the same time, just ensuring that indeed you have a pipeline sufficient enough to be covered whatever amount of bonds you want to raise, because ultimately investors demand, that level of transparency and accountability to see that these bonds are actually put to the intended use.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Fiona, for sharing the link. I will reshare my slides and we can continue this part. I need just to find my slide again. Sorry. So this was the case studies, as we said, related to this use of proceeds bond, so a social bond that had 100% use of proceeds actually to gender equality projects. The gentleman in the video mentioned a couple of very interesting points. I would like maybe to re-highlight them if anyone has missed them. Maybe the very first one is to say that the bond was oversubscribed, which is a definite kind of sign of the interest and the appetite of investors who are really looking and interested in investing in these instruments in the market. Interesting thing, he said also that investors were both local and international ones, which reflects again also the interest from the international investor community in investing in those instruments in these markets. Another one, maybe he mentioned something very interesting, and it applies to all maybe bonds, but in the case definitely of gender bonds, we see we see it a little bit more clearly. It's the point about the data that you need actually to report on in your post-issuance reporting on an annual basis. And I believe you can imagine how tricky might be actually to collect the data from your final beneficiaries, especially if you are a financial institution issuing such an instrument, and your final beneficiaries might be, as it was the case in NMB Bank, small, maybe and medium size and even micro sizes businesses owned by women, maybe spread all over the country maybe in remote areas. It's a bit challenging actually to collect the data about the impact and about the implementation. And the most even challenging one is to know in advance what type of data you will need. So you'll need maybe the number of women that have been financed, you need how much the business is growing, the number of jobs, etc., which have been created, etc., etc. So data is really important also here in order to have a good reporting, best-in-class reporting. And you need, as an issuer, actually to prepare this in advance of the issuance itself. The very last point to say is that this bond was issued by NMB Bank. It was listed locally in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and it was double listed or dual listed also on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange in order to provide international visibility to this local issuance, let's put it like this, and to promote the existence of those instruments in emerging markets. I have another case study, but this time it's about an SLB. We don't have a video for this one, but I will quickly take you through the case. It comes from Equity AB Group, which is an investment company based in Stockholm, who issued actually sustainability-linked bond with a focus on gender. And as you can imagine, and as you can expect, they have put in place actually a gender target or a gender equality target. Actually, they have put two in place. The first one is that they would like to increase the number of women at the investment advisory, the professionals, actually to 28% by 2026 versus 21% of 2020. And the second one is that they would like also to increase the number of independent board members, the women as independent board members appointed at the level of the portfolio companies from 21% in 2020 to 36% in 2026. A couple of points about this issuance. You see the difference now and how gender equality can be really wide. In some places, gender equality is really about maybe financing woman-owned business projects, while in some other places, more advanced economies, the gender equality is more on the, let's say, representation of women in boards, the percentage of women in like high-level management within companies, etc. But the interesting thing is that those instruments can help in both cases, actually, in promoting this. Also, for this case, the issuance was oversubscribed, which again reflects the interest from the investors in the market in investing in these instruments. And as I told you, this is an SLB, gender-focused bond, while the other one was a use of proceeds gender bond. And this is what I wanted to share with you today. Again, thank you so much for the UNSSE colleagues for inviting us. I'm happy to answer questions over the chat if there is any need, and I give it over back to Fiona.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that, Paul, as ever. Really great to bring this to life with some practical real-world examples. So we have had a question that's come up for you, but in the interest of time, yeah, if you could respond in writing in the Q&A box, that would be a big help. But yeah, an interesting question from Jake. So
Will do.
to see what you think of that. Brilliant. Thank you. So I'm just going to be wrapping up on this unit now. So I will reshare this presentation so that we can go back to our slides. So to finish off this unit, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can see gender equality themed products being promoted in the market more generally. And at the SSE, we actually did an assessment of how exchanges are working with their markets to enhance gender equality as part of our guidance for exchanges on this topic. And we found that there were two main ways that markets are promoting gender equality. Firstly, through the promotion of participation, and secondly, through the promotion of impact. So we'll just talk about each of these two briefly as well. So firstly, in terms of promoting participation, what do we mean by this? Well, on both the supply side and the buy side, we're seeing the application of a gender lens in global markets to access unserved segments of the market. So on the sell side, we see markets promoting and supporting women-led businesses or female entrepreneurs. For example, Sourcing to Equal is an IFC-led initiative in partnership with the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative and Norway that aims to connect 5,000 women entrepreneurs to new markets via corporate procurement. And then on the buy side, we can see the investment in and support of women traders and investors as well. And this relates back to what we discussed earlier in terms of the different gender lens investment strategies, which are both things at the portfolio level, but also within the investment firm as well. And this is because it's been well documented that all male investment teams indeed invest in fewer women-led businesses as well. So one example of this type of promotion is an annual women-focused investment summit, which is run by the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, which is called JSE She Invests. And in addition to providing a networking opportunity, the event covers a variety of topics, including finance and investment literacy, and it also showcases different ways in which women can invest in the market. So those are just a few examples of the work being done to promote participation in the market. And the second aspect, as I mentioned, is all around promoting impact. And so this is really thinking about the ability to actually improve gender equality, either within an organization or in society more broadly. And here we're seeing markets raise awareness of financial products and promote listing products through awards or incentives, with the objective of shining a spotlight on those that are having a positive impact. And we also see markets creating segments or indices that aim to make it easier to find and invest in these high impact stocks or financial products, like Eureka spoke to us from Bloomberg in our last session. And so I think it's also important to note that one index can vary from the next. So as we can see here, and as we've heard already, in order to truly capture the holistic picture, which we know from our session earlier in the week is important, we need to look at this topic from many different perspectives. So, for example, if these indices were only collecting data on women on boards, this would, of course, only let us know one aspect of gender equality within a company. And in some instances, this potentially is what we'd want to know. But if we're investing with the objective of either directing capital towards companies that enhance gender equality related goals in society, or because we understand the value of gender equality, like we talked about earlier in the week, then of course what we'll want to know is a much broader breadth of data than just top line statistics on women on boards, etc. However, what you will notice is that the categories of information we're collecting across the organisation, even if they're at different levels of management, can be quite similar. So you can use the categories here to make sure that you're collecting broad enough data. But as we learned last time, sometimes we might think that we're solving a problem or improving gender equality, but actually we could be making it worse or maybe not putting our efforts in the right place. So the best way to really understand and take action is to get to the heart of the issue with data analysis. So we're just going to do a quick Zoom poll now to wrap up this section. So I'll launch that poll for you now. Oh, excuse me, sorry, that's the wrong poll. There we go. So it's just to get a sense from everyone on what the reasons are that investors are looking for gender-related opportunities. So we've heard about several of these here, and so let us know which of these reasons you think are kind of definite reasons that we know that investors will be using. So is it about higher financial performance, access to untapped markets, enhancing the impacts, the climate impacts of investments, preventing men from accessing leadership positions, or diversifying their portfolios. And then finally, managing gender-related risks. So you can select more than one answer here if you think we've got more than one correct option. I'll just give you all a few more seconds to have a think about that. Okay, maybe just 2-3 more seconds and then we'll close the poll. Okay, let's close the poll and I'll share those results. So a range of options, but people particularly highlighted diversifying portfolios, managing gender-related risks, and accessing untapped markets. Indeed, those are all correct options, and actually everything here is the correct option except for number 4, about preventing men from accessing leadership positions. So whilst gender investing can often be seen as a zero-sum game, which might prevent men from moving forward so that women can instead, of course, gender lens investing is not meant for this. And if this is the outcome, then we're going about this in the wrong way. So just a quick reminder and reflection on that point. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this section. So we're going to take a quick break now when we're roughly at the halfway point of the session. So I'll do as I did before and start the timer. So please feel free to take a little stretch, get a drink, or if you have any questions or comments, feel free to make those in the break as well. And we'll regroup in 5 minutes' time. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had the chance to quickly stretch your legs or grab another cup of coffee. So, welcome back. And now that we've had a chance to look at the financial instruments available to promote gender equality, we're going to have a look at how an organization can communicate their performance on gender equality, which can be one means of accessing these gender-specific financing mechanisms. However, this is not only important for communicating with investors your impact, but also internal communication is key to ensure that the culture change that we've discussed throughout the sessions is a necessary aspect of performance and actually takes place. So our final unit of this training has two main sections. We'll talk both about communication and transparency within an organization internally amongst its employees, as well as with external stakeholders. To start, we'll look at how you can manage effective internal communication. While there's many methods used to enhance transparency within an organization, what we want to highlight today is the Gender Equality Action Plan as a tool for communicating with internal stakeholders. To guide us on this, we're very fortunate to have with us Amy, a colleague from UN Women, and Amy will discuss how the WEPs can be used in action for this purpose. So thank you again, Amy, for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Great. Thank you so much, Landon. Are you all right to share the slides for me, Landon and Fiona? I hope so. Okay, great. Thanks so much for having me join today. And I'm really, really pleased to see so many people joining us in the room. I've had the pleasure of meeting some colleagues with the Philippine Stock Exchange. I'm with our UN Women Regional Office for Asia Pacific, based in Bangkok. And I know you met my colleague Tony on Wednesday. So I'm helping to fill in for her a little bit as I also manage the WEPs for Asia and the Pacific. So as we talk about communication, it is important for you to have external, internal communication on your gender equality objectives. And one of the ways you can do that, as Landon has mentioned, is through creating a gender action plan. So this is not only a communication tool, of course, but it is something very powerful to be able to communicate both internally and externally on how you're working towards and achieving your gender equality goals. So a gender equality action plan is really that roadmap for how you're achieving women's empowerment and equality and aligned to the WEPs. This would be across the value chain. So it helps you embed gender equality into your business model, into strategies, systems, and governments, not as a complementary kind of effort or a side effort, but really integrated within the priorities and business plan, and would really contain timelines, succinct goals, indicators, as well as targets. So this allows you to more effectively, efficiently, and also successfully advance gender throughout your organization. So why should you build a gender action plan? One of the key things is really to correct past and present forms of inequality and prevent future recurrence. Typically, developing this action plan would start with assessing where you are right now and doing a baseline. And we'll look at that a bit in a minute, and we have tools to support you in doing this. This also would look at ensuring all company strategies, policy programs, and activities are gender responsive. So really looking across the functions that you do, especially not just siloing in HR. We find a lot of gender equality initiatives taking place, but often limited to HR or talent management departments, but looking across procurement, across operations, across all different departments to see how you can be integrating this. Another reason is to also deepen understanding of gender equality among all stakeholders, whether that's shareholders in the company, board members, internal employees, vendors that you also might procure from, the public through your marketing and advertising. This could also be clients or consumers of your products and services. Communicating in this way also helps build brand loyalty. It attracts new talent, it retains certain talent, and it can also help foster that image of the company. And another really important area that I know SSE is very passionate about, and UN Women, is also measurement data and reporting. So it allows you to track progress, right? What we measure gets managed. So it allows you to track that progress in real time and assess where you stand on gender equality. Okay, so what do you need to include in a gender action plan, and how do you start doing this? If we could go to the next slide, please. Great, thanks so much. Okay, so the steps of creating a gender action plan. This just guides you through a few different things that you can do and steps that you can take to guide you in developing this. So the first thing is really establishing clear goals. So guided by the 7 principles, as you heard about on Wednesday, the WEPS does cross the entire value chain, from looking at boardrooms into workplaces, into supply chains, factory floors, your marketing practices, community advocacy initiatives that you have, and then of course, transparency and reporting. So establishing those goals is the first step. This could be something a bit broader, like establishing an inclusive workplace, building a pipeline for women in leadership, building a family-friendly organization, or perhaps you want to look at your supplier diversity and foster a more inclusive supply chain. So one of the first ways I think that you can actually look at those goals, and it relates to what you might set as a baseline, is actually get an assessment of where you stand now. So I think as was introduced on Wednesday, we have a tool called the WEPS Gender Gap Analysis Tool. We can share more details, and we do also do specific training modules if we want to do one of those for the Philippines, that takes you through a really comprehensive assessment across the pillars and the areas of the WEPS, and also looks at where you stand in terms of commitment, implementation, monitoring, and then also transparency and reporting. Thank you so much, Landon. It's really nifty to have the link right in there already. Thank you, especially for a Friday. So really taking that tool, and actually it's really interesting because we've heard many companies that when they take the tool also opens them up to things they didn't think of before based on the answers. So that can help you take a look at where you stand across these different areas. It gives you a very nice automatic heat map of results, and then you can look at establishing your goals from there. After this, you can move on to the activities, right? What are we going to do to actually, yes, I just see one question in the chat. All the slides will be shared, and I can always share more. I'll keep it brief today, but we can always talk a lot more about this. So creating those activities, right? And the measures that actually help you implement these goals. What will you be doing to achieve this goal, right? And this could be across several different WEPs, several different things that you need to do to achieve that. The next thing that's really, really important after you have those activities is setting a baseline. Where do we stand now, right? And this could be something also, do we have a policy, do we not? Or this could actually be metrics. Where do we stand in terms of women in senior management? How about across different departments? Maybe we're doing really good in finance, but when we look at procurement or IT, for example, we really see a big gap. Maybe you also look at the pay gap and where you're standing right now, right? That data is really the critical piece to assessing and monitoring improvements. And then, right, after you have the goals and activities, equally important to set actual targets and a timeline, right? So what will our target be over time? How we actually, the indicator we're using to actually meet progress? And do we want to increase to 50%, to 80%, whatever it is we're talking about, or potentially increase increase procurement spend on women-owned businesses or diverse-owned businesses by 2% by next year, for example, if it's a really new area you're starting on, or women on boards could be another thing that you set. as your target, and give yourself a timeline to achieve that. You may also want to set indicators or sub-activities that you do to set as milestones, right? The really smaller steps of what you would need to do to start actioning and achieving your gender action plan. Next is really appointing an owner to the plan. And I think this is a really important one, is that there needs to be a key owner to the plan so that someone is accountable for monitoring progress and results. I think a key tip here as well is that it's really critical to have leadership buy-in. I know that's not always easy, but it's the reason why WEP 1 is corporate leadership and why we have the CEO sign the statement of support to join the WEPs, so that you have leadership buy-in and backing. Because I think the other critical thing here that we also see is to appoint a main owner, but then also to think of what other units or other colleagues you may need to work with to achieve the goal. And I think that's also where leadership buy-in is really important, because then you have that kind of opening to then work with different departments that you may need to, especially if you're in a large company. This really won't be able to happen with one person, one unit alone. So on the next slide, we have a few more things to consider as you start building up your action plan. Great. Okay. So I love all the hearts coming around. Great motivation as well for a Friday. So is your goal specific? This is a really good one as well, too. I know I gave the example of building the pipeline for leadership for women. That could be an overall kind of objective you're linking to, but you want to work towards, with SMART goals. So specific, measurable, actionable, right? And with this clear timeline. So can you measure progress towards the goal? How? Is it realistically attainable, right? And that's where you might want to have the smaller milestones at a time. And also think how processes work internally in your organization. Do you need approval from different units? Who are you going to be working with to achieve the goal? Also think about how relevant it is right now to your organization, to your board priorities, to the market that you're operating in right now. Is this really something that the business is primed to do, and that really speaks to the goals and vision, I think, of the model and the company? Make sure that it's locally relevant and specific to you. And then also ensure that you really have a timeline in mind of when you want to do this. And I think I would suggest as well those smaller points of milestone actions. Okay, on the next slide, as you also start to think about your plan, these targets also need to be supported by practical implementation guidelines. Some of these could also be coming from resources that UN Women offers. It could be SSE. You could even be looking to an example of a bond, if that's even potentially something that's within a vision of your action plan, depending on the type of company. And then this is where communication really comes in and is quite important, right? There needs to be regular communication channels and frequent communication to all employees and stakeholders to ensure they're aware of the action plan and related activities. If possible, when you also set your objectives and do some of that assessment and benchmarking, engage your employees, whether that's through an annual employee engagement survey or some focus group discussions that you might have to really figure out how they feel the organization performs in terms of gender equality or inclusivity. Engage your vendors as well, or consumers, in figuring out what they would want to see from you in terms of commitments to gender equality. Sharing progress is also really critical. And this is also why you need to be able to track specific and measurable data. So you can, in your ESG or your annual sustainability report, actually release to the public or your shareholders how you've made progress with those tangible kind of indicators. You may not have impacts at first if you're just starting on your journey or depending on the goal. But again, measurement and data is really critical. And we can also support if you need ideas of different targets and how you may want to achieve certain steps along the way. And then I think, as we say, WEPs, in action. It's also a continuous process. I think like this journey Fiona mentioned at the beginning of really continuous engagements with different stakeholders, internal and external, and also getting regular feedback on the plan and where you might need to refine or reassess. So I think this is our final slide of the WEPs in action. Landon, I need to check my deck again, but I believe it is. I'll just say before I leave you guys for now, so all of these slides I presented today are from a module that we have available on weps.org. It's called the WEPs Learn module, and we do actually have one on action planning to support you to set this up. We do also have an action planning tool that's currently Excel based, and it is available. It's not publicly available, but for Asia Pacific signatories, we are in a process of actually updating it and refining it. And so if any of you are interested, I'll have maybe Fiona and Landon support you to reach out to us at UN Women, and we'd be happy to help you develop that. So I'll stop there and happy to stay to answer any other questions. Thanks, Landon.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy, for that wonderful overview and presentation on the WEPs and putting the WEPs into action. Really helpful. And yeah, as Amy said, we're fortunate to have another expert here with us today, specifically on the WEPs as well. So don't hesitate to use the Q&A function to ask any questions to Amy while we have her. So moving along, now that we've covered communicating to internal stakeholders, let's move on to communicating to external stakeholders. To kick this off, we're going to do a quick Zoom poll to see how your organizations are currently disclosing gender-related information. So if you give me one moment, I'll launch that. Okay. So the question is, does your company disclose gender-related information through one or more of these mechanisms? So you can select multiple here. So is it a CSR, ESG sustainability report, maybe an annual financial report, maybe a gender pay gap report? Perhaps it's all of the above, or maybe none of the above, or you're not sure, you don't know. So I'll give you a few seconds. It's always interesting to see some of these answers. And as you're filling this in, please feel free to let us know in the chat, what do you think determines where gender-related information should appear? What factor are you looking for to decide if, for example, information should appear in an annual financial reporting package using ISSB's IFRS sustainability disclosure standards, or instead maybe a sustainability report, perhaps using GRI standards? If you have any thoughts or, expertise, feel free to share that in the chat. Okay, we'll end the poll there. A lot of answers coming through. With that, we see a lot are disclosing in an annual financial report, a lot are disclosing in a CSR, ESG, or sustainability report. Fortunately, some are none of the above. We really encourage you to encourage your leadership, if you're not a leader, to change that. And if you're not sure, we really encourage you to ask some questions and find out where it's visible and where you're reporting and disclosing. Now, who you communicate to defines where you report and what standard you will use. So to report to investors, the primary location of your gender-related disclosures will be in your annual report. The International Sustainability Standards Board, or ISSB, has consolidated the major investor-oriented sustainability disclosure standards. And for reporting to other stakeholders, you might want to use the GRI standards, which are widely used by organizations globally. Together, these can form a holistic reporting package to a wide range of stakeholders. In terms of the content for each type of audience, for investors, you might focus your disclosure on financially material risks and opportunities related to gender equality, as well as any other information that can help investors in their investment decisions and engagement with the company. As I said, this goes into your annual report alongside your financial statements and other disclosures. To communicate to a broader stakeholder group, you'd report more about the impact of your business on the environment, society, and economy at large. As well, this will be more in line with what they want to know. At the same time, this information will also be useful to some of your investors, and it will support the information you reported in your annual financial report. To report to investors in your annual financial report, IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards requires your organization to disclose 4 broad areas, which you may already recognize if you're familiar with the recommendations of TCFD, or the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. The ISSB S1 standard requires an entity to disclose information about all sustainability-related risks and opportunities that could reasonably be expected to affect the entity's cash flows, its access to finance, or cost of capital over the short, medium, or long term. While the ISSB doesn't yet provide specific metrics or disclosure requirements on gender equality, it does highlight that companies should make use of the SASB standards and GRI standards to identify appropriate disclosures for sustainability-related risks and opportunities. When looking at multi-stakeholder reporting, we went through GRI standards and identified those that most directly address gender equality to help you know where to find guidance on gender equality disclosures for sustainability reports. So we see here 2-7, employees, 2-9, governance structure and composition, policy commitments, and approach to stakeholder engagement. And you see the specific references with the numbers as well, so you can find further information there too. And GRI has already transitioned to its new modular structure with the revised universal standards introduced a few years ago in 2021. The guidance from 2016 standards can still provide valuable context. Although sector and topic standards are in various stages of development and revision, they can continue to offer important insights for materiality assessments and reporting. So here we see a few that you can still look at for more information, like GRI 405 and 406. Now, we want to move along into some actual examples of disclosures. We've looked at the standards. We have a few real-world examples here. But these examples are just excerpts from annual reports, so they present a piece of a bigger picture. They're examples of current practice, and we're not passing judgment on them if they're best practice or the good or bad practices. First, we'll look at this governance disclosure from the annual report of Airtel, who's a Nigerian telecommunications company. In line with the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards requirement, they reported about the processes they use to monitor, manage, and oversee their sustainability-related performance. Airtel noted that the non-financial performance KPIs linked to their sustainability strategy includes gender diversity. They also noted that these KPIs are linked to board remuneration, which I think is a pretty strong incentive for the board to take this seriously. The next example is on strategy disclosures. These aim to help the readers of your report understand your strategy for managing sustainability-related risks and opportunities. And here we can see the annual report of Astra International, an Indonesian conglomerate. Astra outlines the importance of the diversity of its employees to its success. Importantly, this statement is then backed up by a roadmap you see on the right-hand side, as well as other actions to manage the opportunity they see through having a gender diverse workforce. In other parts of the report, they also go into further details about how the company is implementing this plan and this roadmap. For example, they're using programs to make the workplace more suitable for women, as well as a women development program, which prepares women leaders for higher positions. I think it's interesting that they note that human capital development in 2022 covers 3 focus areas, which are to build an agile organization, develop passionate and energetic leaders so as to be able to navigate the organization in facing business challenges, as well carry out the culture of continuous improvement and innovation to maintain Astra's relevancy in the era of disruptions. That's maybe a bit jargony per se, but essentially what Astra International is stating is that a more diverse and gender equal business can help to maintain the company's relevancy in an era of disruptions. So this is an interesting insight into their strategic approach to gender equality. I'll go to, we'll do the third and final disclosure. I'll leave risk management for you to review on your own time. But here I want to discuss a disclosure example on reporting gender-related metrics and targets used by Cemex, a Mexican multinational cement company. They also state in an annual report that it's a signatory to the UN Women's Empowerment Principles, or the WEPs, as well as the UN Global Compact's target gender equality. In this example, we can see Cemex updating on the progress made towards gender equality in their workforce. They're in an industry that's traditionally male-dominated, and therefore they might be starting from a lower percentage of women than perhaps a company from another industry. This example does, however, show that any business can take action towards gender equality. Cemex also set a new goal to increase the representation of women in senior management positions. So they specified the base year being 2022. They set a target of 30% and a target year of 2030. In the report, they also report on metrics such as percentage of workforce by gender, percentage of female employees by position, and woman to men remuneration ratio by region. And I really like that they disaggregated the data by region as well. So that's a nice way to split up the data too. I want to mention on this topics of metrics and disclosures, the SSE has just released a new report that provides the first comprehensive comparative assessment of gender-related disclosure metrics issued by stock exchanges and standard setters worldwide, and we really encourage you to take a few minutes to check this report out. So in addition to the standards we've just discussed, there's also additional organizations that you can look at for more guidance on the topic. And as mentioned, SSE is regularly producing reports on guidance and on metrics. So don't hesitate to check out the SSE website for guidance, tools, and other reports. But there's also other guiding principles for you to consider, such as the UN Charter of Human Rights, the UN SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, and of course, the UN WEPs, which we've discussed just a little while ago with Amy. In addition, it's always important to know what disclosures are required of your organization by law. Beyond this, there's also a number of rankings or benchmarks to consider, such as those of the World Benchmarking Alliance. And there's also lots of indices and rating agencies that take into account the social performance of companies, such as the Bloomberg Gender Equality Index, amongst others. Finally, there's management standards that your organization may wish to adopt, which can help enhance your organization's performance on gender. So there we suggest looking at the ISO standards, and there's also the SDG impact standards, which are management practice standards designed to help guide businesses and investors to embed sustainability into their decision-making approach. Hopefully this provides an overview of some of the disclosure guidelines you can consider, but previously we also talked about standards and certifications that can be used to develop your organization's gender equality practices and disclosures. And with that, we're very happy to have with us Nina Peterson here from the EDGE Certified Foundation to tell us more about that. Oh, sorry, or maybe, oh yeah, sorry, we made a mistake, Nina, apologies on the slide. We'll get your photo and information right next time, but turn it over to you.
No worries. I'm not sure if I'm able to present.
You should have access to share your screen now, Nina. Is that
Okay. Let me try. Okay. You should be able to see my screen now.
We can, yeah. I don't know if you can just pop it into full screen mode. I think you can do it on the bottom right. It's quite big if not, but yeah, just sometimes.
Yeah, I can't see the options, so I hope this is okay.
Just, I think it's the third icon up on the bottom, very bottom right corner.
On the here?
Just there, yeah.
All right.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, everyone, also from my side, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to introduce you to EDGE certification today. So I'm going to take you through how EDGE certification works, what we assess, and show 2 examples of how our certification helps organizations move from intention to impact when it comes to gender and intersectional equity in the workplace. Just before I get into all that, a few quick notes. So we're a little bit different to what we've heard up until now. EDGE is a voluntary sustainability standard that focuses on achieving gender equity in the workplace and better gender balance at all levels of an organization. So we're looking at an organization's own workforce, and that's what sets us apart a little bit, is the in-depth assessment and the independent third-party audit that also underpins our certification. So we're not a disclosure standard, not like the GRI. We're a measure of actual performance, and our role is to help organizations understand where they stand today, where there are gaps, and how to build a focused and achievable action plan towards greater gender and intersectional equity in the workplace. EDGE is a structured ecosystem to deliver an independent, credible third-party certification system. So just to briefly mention some of the stakeholders in our ecosystem, we work closely with EDGE Strategy, and EDGE Strategy works with and prepares the organizations to become ready for EDGE certification through the use of its software solution, EDGE Empower. EDGE Strategy is also able to license the use of EDGE Empower platform to licensing partners. And EDGE Strategy currently have a licensing agreement with the IFC. So IFC is also licensed to use EDGE Empower and work with organizations and prepare them for EDGE certification. And we also work with 3 independent certification bodies, SGS, FlowCert, and Intertek, who undertake the independent audits. Okay, so moving on. The EDGE standards and certification system are built on 4 foundational pillars that you can see on the slide here that define success in gender and intersectional equity. So the first pillar is representation, and we look at representation across different types of jobs and different levels of responsibility. The second pillar is pay equity. The third pillar is effectiveness of policies and practices. So here we're looking that an organization has a solid framework of policies and practices ensuring equitable career flows when it comes to 5 focus areas. And these 5 focus areas are pay, recruitment and promotion, leadership development, training and mentoring, flexible working, and organizational culture. And the final pillar is about understanding how inclusive the culture of the organization is, as reflected in employees' experiences in terms of their career development opportunities within the organization. So moving on, for the assessment, we look at 3 sources of information to evaluate an organization's own workforce. And again, on the slide, you can see these 3 sources of information. We look at organizational statistics for a chosen 12-month reference period. Then we look at policies and practices that the organization has in place during the same reference period. And finally, we look at the experience of the employees, which is captured through an employee survey. And the employee survey is undertaken close to the end of the 12-month reference period. And we use these 3 sources of information to triangulate them and look at gender and intersectional equity from these 3 angles. So this triangulated approach helps to identify if these sources are aligned, or if and where there are gaps between what a company says it does and how those actions are actually experienced across different groups. So it's this depth of insight that helps organizations move beyond assumptions that they may have and design targeted and effective solutions to address the gaps that they're seeing. Then moving on, we have 3 levels of certification. So EDGE certification has these 3 levels of achievement. It's a tiered system, which means organizations at different stages of progress can take part. There are no barriers to entry. So any organization that commits to the process will be assessed and certified. And the goal is to recognize where the organization is today and to create an action plan for making further progress over time. So very quickly, the first level, EDGE Assess, recognizes commitment. The second level, EDGE Move, showcases progress in workplace gender equity. So at the EDGE Move level, the organization has reached the EDGE standards in some of the assessed areas. And EDGE Lead is the highest EDGE certification level, showing that the organization meets every single one of the EDGE standards across the 4 pillars of the methodology that I presented a few slides ago. And then down the bottom of the slide, you can also see that organizations can be certified EDGE Plus. This is in addition to one of the 3 levels of certification. So EDGE Plus is an add-on to the EDGE Gender Binary certification. And it enables organizations to deepen their understanding of gender-related matters by analysing the intersectionality of gender and other chosen aspects of diversity. So now I have 2 case studies which demonstrate the impact of working with the EDGE standards. On this slide, on the left, you can see some high-level information about the organisation, the client's profile. So it's an organisation from the energy industry with a fairly large workforce, 1,800 employees, and the workforce is dominated by men. And they have been certified 3 times. So moving to the right of the screen, you can see some results graphs. And we can see that when they were first assessed in 2020, they didn't meet the EDGE threshold for gender representation at any management level. So as part of the EDGE certification progress, organizations create an action plan. And for this organization, their primary focus became improving representation over the next years. And with a clear action plan in place, they were able to significantly strengthen the gender balance within their management levels. So on the slide, you can see that for junior management and upper management, they reached the minimum required level of 30% according to the EDGE standards. And yeah, so they were able to shift representation in a fairly short time. Their progress is a strong example of what committed action with regard to pay equity, recruitment and promotion of female talent, as well as leadership development training and mentoring can achieve. So also on the slide down the bottom, you can see the process. This is the process diagram referring to the process using the EDGE Empower software. Here we have a second case study, and again, we have the client profile on the left. It's a smaller company in the financial services sector, which has been EDGE certified twice. When they were first assessed, their policies and practices, particularly around recruitment and promotion and leadership development and mentoring, were in place, but maybe we can assume that they were too high level and generic to drive real change, so they weren't meeting the thresholds. And through a more targeted and practical action plan, they were able to align it with their overall business strategy and strengthen these areas significantly. So as a result, they achieved the EDGE standards across all aspects of the policies and practice effectiveness upon their recertification. here you can see our logo circle. You might see some familiar names. CEMEX is also on here. We had the case study before. So we have organizations from all types of sectors and regions, including listed companies, international organizations, and various others. And they are all assessed against the same global standard. So what this also shows is that there are different flexible ways to work with EDGE certification and to reach the various levels of certification. So any organization is eligible as long as there are over 100 employees. And that brings me to the end of my slides. Thanks for listening. And yeah, I just wanted to also guide you towards our website where we also share articles and research all related to workplace fairness and gender and intersectional equity. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nina. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my camera to refocus. There we go. Apologies. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that presentation. I think a really helpful overview and, you know, a fantastic tool, I think, to support organizations on this topic. I'm just having
Thank you.
had any questions come in whilst you were presenting? I don't think so, but we do have a little bit of spare time. So if you wouldn't mind, I might ask a question or two from my side, if that's okay. I think obviously you've, as an organization, worked now with over 800 organizations to obtain the EDGE certification, which is fantastic. And or maybe not worked with all of them, but the certification's been provided to that many organizations. I guess there's kind of maybe what you expected the impacts to be of that process, but have there been any maybe additional impact or benefits beyond what you might have expected that have been sort of interesting or surprising to find out about? That was a tricky question, put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah, I think I would have to have some more time to think about
No problem, no problem, no.
what I can say, but I think what we notice again and again with the organizations that are EDGE certified is that it really gives them a clear evidence-based understanding of why certain dynamics exist within their organization, and it gives them a really good tool to be able to address them. And I think also now in the current sort of environment, involving a third-party audit, so they can receive an objective and unbiased assessment of their gender equity performance, really builds trust with their stakeholders and ensures accountability. So I think, yeah, that
Great.
continues to be a really important part of working with the EDGE certification.
No, absolutely. Thank you. I think that's a really important point to highlight. Yeah, definitely something we'd advocate for as well. So, well, fantastic. Thanks so much for that segment. We really appreciate it. So we're coming up to the end of the session now. So I'll just take us back into a few things to wrap up the session. But yeah, big thank you to Nina, Paul and Amy for their segments in the training. So Landon's just shared the link again to Menti. So as we're now sort of closing out the session, we want to just wrap up and reflect really on where we're at with our kind of understanding and comfort on those objectives that we set out to help you with in today's training. So I'll just have a quick look at this with you together. So, thank you for those who've already taken part in the poll. That's great. So I think we started out somewhere on average around the 5 out of 10 mark on the scale here. So it's great to see for those who've responded so far that we're feeling somewhat more confident in understanding and communicating these topics now. So that's fantastic. I think hopefully what we've shown today is that there's a lot of resources out there that you can use to support you both in better understanding and accessing gender lens finance and really seeing the benefits of that. And also really thinking about these internal and external communication opportunities as well. So yeah, I think hopefully we'll leave you with a little bit more knowledge here, but we appreciate this is very much an ongoing process. So lots more to learn for all of us on this topic, I know. Brilliant. So I think just to close us out in Menti, it's just interesting to get a sense from everyone as to what your key takeaway is and what's standing out to you as something that you learned, or maybe an action point that you want to take away to share with your colleagues or to understand more and do something about internally. So I'll just give you a moment to reflect on that, and then we'll go back and just share a few wrap-up resources and the crucial information about how to get your completion certificate for the training as well. Great. I'm sure Nina will be pleased to see Edge coming through there as a big takeaway to learn more about. So that's fantastic. Women power. I like that phrase. Great. Financial impacts, equality. As mentioned, gender impact, baseline data, absolutely. So getting that data to understand and inform our actions that we're going to take. Great, lots of good words coming here. Maybe more on gender bonds, on using the WEPs. Diversification, thinking about the difference between equality and equity. Excellent. Okay, great. Lots of the concepts that we've discussed coming up, so it's good to know those things have resonated. Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. So thanks everyone for that. So a couple more slides just to go back to now. And then we'll close out the session. So firstly, just to say as we wrap up, there's lots of resources available to you to continue your learning journey here. So within the slide handouts that you can access from the resources page that Landon's just reshared the link to again, you'll be able to find a number of different resources, publications, aligned to each of the units we've covered in the training. If you go to the web page, you can also access the guest speaker materials for each guest segment we've had, which will include details on how to follow up and take next steps with them as well. So just to quickly show you, we won't run through all of these, but you can see within the slide handout here, for each unit, we've got a set of links and hyperlinks to all of the resources we've talked about. So make sure to check those out online in the resources section of the web page. And finally, so we're really grateful for all of the feedback you've given us and engagement in this training. And as a token of our appreciation for that, and also to hear from you about your thoughts on the training programme, we'd be very grateful if you can fill out our feedback survey, and then this is the route through which we'll be sending you your completion certificate. So if you follow that link that Landon has just shared with you in the chat box now, that will take you to a Google survey. If you fill that out, we'll then send you a certificate to the email address that you complete the survey with within the next week or so. Sometimes we know that organizations' firewalls and filters can block you receiving your certificate. So if you think that could be a problem in your organization, we'd recommend perhaps using a personal email address just to make sure that you can receive the survey. And be sure as well to check your junk folder if you're missing your survey in a week's time to make sure it's not got lost in the junk folders. But keep an eye out for that email for us within the next week. But if you do have any problems after a week in getting your certificate, feel free to reach out to the SSE team. Our contact details are at the end of the presentation. So here as well, as you see in the presentation, these are the contact details for each of the organisations who've been involved today, and the guest speakers are also in the presentations, as I said, on the website. But all that really remains for me is to say a big thank you in particular for our guest speakers who've joined us for part 2 today, for Paul from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange and to Nina from Edge Certified Foundation. And of course, a big thank you to all of the partner organisations. So firstly, to the SSE official supporters who play a big role in making these trainings possible, and especially to the partner organisations for this training programme. So the IFC, to UN Women, and especially to Amy for joining us today to present from the UN Women team. We really greatly appreciate that collaboration between our organisations. And finally, to the Columbia University, to the government of Luxembourg, and of course, a big thank you to the Philippine Stock Exchange, to Rich and Ramon and the team at the PSE for hosting us here today. And finally, a big thank you to all of you who've joined us here live. We know it's right at the end of Friday afternoon for everyone in the Philippines, so we really appreciate you choosing to end your week with us here at the training. And wishing you all the best with your future endeavours to progress these topics. So we hope you've enjoyed the time together. We'll close the session out there, but hope to see you again at a future training. And thanks again to everyone for your involvement. Great. Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and goodbye.